Yeah, so I'm Brandon from ZetaChain. And yeah, I lead product at ZetaChain. Kind of touch some of protocol development, some of engineering generally, as well as user-facing product. And today, just going to go over a broad look at what multi-chain, Omnichain is, go into what ZetaChain is building and how it's trying to solve some of the problems in that space, and then get into a few examples of how you might build something. We're calling it Omnichain Smart Contracts on top of ZetaChain. And then afterwards, I'll look at a few potential opportunities that might be interesting for you guys, as well as Q&A. And I'll also be around a bit after if you guys want to chat about anything. So yeah, to start, I think it's pretty obvious the past few years we see a lot of new L1s, L2s popping up every month, year, whatever. And a lot of them have serious use cases, social graphs, etc. A lot of them are here to stay. And with that kind of assumption, we get into like this progression of the development of the ecosystem. So you have these new L1s and L2s. They are closed systems by nature. Even with something like Polkadot or Cosmos ecosystem, they are restricted to a certain bubble or subset of the crypto ecosystem. And when you're trying to transact between them, there initially has never been a way to transact between them. So to start, the way to do that is using a centralized exchange. So you deposit into Coinbase or FTX or whatever, do your transaction, trading or whatever financial instruments they have, and then you can output to another chain. So that's the kind of base case solution. And again, that's just centralized. It's just like someone's server doing that ledger and transaction for you. Beyond that, more recently, probably the last 3-4 years, and even more so the past 1 or 2 years, have been these pairwise bridges. Things like the Wormhole Bridge, Nomad, et cetera, that have varying security models, but generally try to do what centralized exchanges do, getting your assets from one place to another in ideally more decentralized way. And then with all of those, they are generally asset specific, chain specific. So it's kind of a clunky experience. And you see new products like Leaf Finance or Socket that are trying to aggregate them. So if you want to say swap USDC on Ethereum for BUSD on BNB chain, that aggregator like LeFi will figure out the right route. It'll choose the bridge for you. But then underlying, you still have the varying security models, and you don't really have a good choice when you do that. And then even more recently, you've seen cross-chain messaging solutions. So things like Layer 0, Axeler, Seller, where you can send arbitrary data, sometimes forms of value from chain to chain. And then those kind of require smart contracts deployed on every chain to send and receive them. And yeah, when you look at that set of tooling, what the ecosystem has tended towards is this high-risk, fragmented, and restrictive pattern. So first, a lot of the classic bridging solutions, even those more decentralized approaches, adopt this wrapping and vault structure. So say you wanted to build a bridge from Ethereum to Solana. The classic bridge is everyone deposits Ethereum to this vault on Ethereum, and then their solution, the middleman, mints these wrapped versions of that asset, so wrapped ETH on Solana. What happens is that vault is increasingly a honeypot to attack. So you saw that in the wormhole situation where that got to a point where it was ripe for the taking in a lot of ways and ended up being compromised. So it increasingly puts users at risk. And then just fragmentation. So again, with those bridges, you have this choice paralysis. You don't know what is good, what is not. You just end up defaulting to whatever discovers you first in a lot of ways. And a lot of these bridging solutions take a lot of time, can be pretty costly, and just have pretty bad UX even when you already discover it. And then they're restrictive in the sense that, yeah, you're bound to certain tooling, certain bubbles in the crypto ecosystem, and overall, it is just a huge blocker for a lot of new users and even crypto natives from trying things in the ecosystem. And because of that restrictiveness, this is kind of where the mindset's at of what interoperability can be right now. This is sort of like the zeitgeist. So you have cross-chain swap and pairwise bridges. So when you ask an everyday crypto user, like, what is interoperability, they'll point you to a DEX. And that's kind of like the limit of what application people are imagining right now, at least from a user standpoint. And then also with interoperability, people imagine it just like Uniswap, where they deploy the same contract on a bunch of different chains. It's not really interoperable. It's just the same app cloned on a bunch of different chains, and you can have the same experience, but using a different network. Not really interoperability. And then another symbol of interoperability is wrapped tokens. So again, it's kind of a patchy solution on the larger problem of communicating between chains. But when, yeah, this is kind of like the initial solution. And at ZetaChain, what we're thinking about is what interoperability can be, sort of in an end state, or 2 to 5 years in the future. And a lot of it is kind of intuitive, so being able to pay from and receive into any wallet. You don't need to bridge some assets to buy an NFT on Solana if everything's on Ethereum. It should just be a seamless experience for you as an end user. And then again, no more wrapped tokens. That interdependency risk is just kind of like a plague on the ecosystem, at least how we think about it. And of course, wrapped can mean a lot of things, but this is mostly just referring to that bridging I was referring to earlier. And then, yeah, chain agnostic NFTs and fungible tokens. So you can imagine NFT collections or like ERC20 equivalents that are multi-chain by nature in a decentralized way. Not something like USDC where you have a centralized issuer, but something where the tokens are actually just fungible between multiple different networks. And then, yeah, a lot of experiences, whether it's marketplaces, DeFi, whatever, you can abstract the network from a user. So a user just needs to have a wallet, have assets, and can transact with anything, your application, anyone else's, from a single place. And those applications can actually operate and take advantage of the high compute, security settlement, whatever, of the underlying networks. But that complexity, it doesn't have to be learned by every user who uses your product. And then for more enterprise solutions, you have like Omnichain portfolio management. So a lot of enterprises and companies need to manage assets across many different chains. Right now, that's generally just internal centralized solutions. So you can imagine in the future you have a way to do ledger of all of your assets, Bitcoin, Solana, Cosmos ecosystem, and how you're rebalancing that from a single place. So yeah, the next step we're thinking about for multi-chain and omni-chain is a combination of messaging and smart contracts. So messaging, as I said before, is this sort of asynchronous way of programming where you have contracts deployed on every chain and you pass messages, you broadcast when things happen and have to handle those. And it's not really, you can't really achieve atomic transactions in this sense. It makes sense for a lot of applications, but is kind of complex to build a lot of the core primitives you might want to build in crypto. So Omnichain smart contracts are the flip side of this, where you can program in a synchronous way, in a single place of logic, the orchestration of assets on many different chains. So together, it's kind of this complete toolkit, and these are core features that ZetaChain is focusing on. So ZetaChain's a new L1 focused on interoperability from day one. And yeah, so it's built on Cosmos SDK. I'm sure some of you guys have worked on either chains or worked directly with that. Proof of stake, it uses something called Tendermint consensus. Nothing super new on the consensus layer, but it uses something called TSS, threshold signature schemes to be able to act as if it were a wallet on an external chain. And this can be integrated into signing on any chain, really, like whether it's Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Solana, EVM ecosystem. It is agnostic to chain and layer and doesn't really require any integration work on the network itself. It's just on ZetaChain's side. And then another cool thing about this is everything on ZetaChain can be abstracted to a single step transaction. So whether you are rebalancing your portfolio across all of the chains you're operating on, or you're just doing a cross-chain swap that's one-to-one, to a user, all you have to do is connect your MetaMask on whatever network you're on and sign a transaction. And that messaging, gas fees are all bundled into that transaction. So overall, this lets us unify liquidity. So you can actually transfer value natively with ZetaChain's messaging. So it actually swaps against Zeta. So if you swapped Bitcoin for Ethereum on mainnet, Bitcoin would swap to Zeta. Zeta would be burned, minted on Ethereum mainnet, and then swapped for Ethereum. So you don't have any bridging or any vaults that is increasing in risk. And yeah, again, these two features are kind of the core tooling that surfaces to developers and in turn end users. So how we work, just a high level, is our nodes are able to read relevant transactions from external chains and reach consensus on them. And in turn, it uses that TSS bit to be able to sign transactions as if it were a hot wallet on those chains. So together, this lets you have these sort of atomic UTXO-like transactions between different blockchains, and also that you can layer on smart contract logic in the Zeta EVM to orchestrate that. So you could have EVM contract that's taking input from external chains and outputting to multiple chains, only having to deploy in a single place. And yeah, a little bit on the security bit. So that TSS, I know I said something like hot wallet, blah, 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 but it is able to act as a hot wallet, but actually is never exposing a private key to any party. So the private key that is custodied by the ZetaChain network is done in a decentralized way. Every node has a key share, and together they can collectively sign as one wallet. And then that messaging bit of swapping against Zeta, when you settle your transaction on an external chain, your funds are never at risk. There's no vault that can render your wrapped asset worthless or anything like that. And once you get your transaction through, you're good. You're just operating on that external chain. And yeah, so on top of just signing transactions, again, ZetaChain can act as a wallet. So you can send Bitcoin or Ethereum to ZetaChain's TSS address. It's just like your own address on whatever chain you're operating on. And the smart contracts can manage those assets. So you could create something like Bitcoin smart contracts, but just using a Solidity, like tried and true Uniswap or whatever you want to build, which is quite cool and lets you ramp up very quickly as an existing EVM developer. And yeah, together, we think this is two sides of the same coin, kind of completing this Omnichain toolkit that lets you as a developer pick and choose what architecture you need for your application. So messaging is really just the implementation of sending, receiving, and handling reverts. So if you have an NFT contract that you want to bring multi-chain, you could deploy this NFT contract with these three functions on whatever chains you want to support, and then they are tradable across those different chains. So it makes a lot of sense for this async, just one unidirectional operation sort of application, like just burning and minting an NFT. But when you want to do something that is really state heavy, like say a lending application, that can get pretty complex when you want to support 3 or more chains. So Omnichain Smart Contracts are the flip side, where you can keep all that logic in a single place. Your contract can custody and manage those assets, trade them, integrate them with other chains, as if they were all on one chain, really. And again, you can deploy Curve or Aave or Uniswap, V2, V3, whatever, without modifying it at all. And then you can sprinkle in the input-output to and from external chains in just a matter of lines. And I'll get to a couple examples to make that a bit clearer. And yeah, just driving this home, just a little visualization if you wanted to implement a Curve pool. So for those who aren't familiar, Curve is a DEX contract that has quite a lot of total value locked. But when people are trying to build this sort of stable swap DEX for multi-chain with messaging right now, it gets very complex where if you are managing, like say Bitcoin, Ethereum, BUSD on their native chains, you have to broadcast messages and maintain state for every transaction to maintain this pool. But with ZetaChain, Omnichain Smart Contracts, all you really have to do is deploy Curve as it is on ZetaChain and then create that triple pool on ZetaChain. And then everything is interfaced as if it is a ERC20, which is quite easy. It's kind of how people program right now. And then in other pieces with messaging, you can't integrate Bitcoin in the same way. You have to wrap it in some form. So with this, you actually are operating on native Bitcoin. And when someone trades for Bitcoin, you can automatically just output it to their address or their wallet. So how do I build Omnichain Smart Contracts? This is a quick visualization of what it looks like from a user standpoint and kind of how it works internally. So if you wanted to do a Bitcoin swap, say on that Curve example, your Bitcoin wallet or whatever application you're interfacing with your Bitcoin wallet will send Bitcoin just like a simple transfer. And there's a thing called OP return where you can include a memo. And in that memo, you would say, I want to call this swap contract on ZetaChain. I want to output to this Ethereum address. The gas fees, at least for Bitcoin, it's always just sending. But the gas fees on that external chain is just a simple send. So if you replace this side with Cosmos or Solana or some L2, the gas is pretty much minimized. It's just like send as if you were sending in MetaMask. When that gets to ZetaChain, it picks that transaction up and sees, oh, I want to call this swap contract. It calls it, and then it's really just a couple functions. So you would call Curve just like you would on Ethereum, and then you would withdraw to the target asset or target destination. So very simple and doesn't require you to really recreate the wheel at all. And what this looks like in code, so so this on cross-chain call this is like implementation of an interface where if you want this to be callable by the system through that, like picking up that message from an external chain, you just implement this function. You parse out the params, whatever you need to, and for the purpose of swapping, this is a Uniswap example. It's really just these 3 lines at the bottom. So you approve the usage of this ZRC20. So ZRC20 is like a way to interface with external assets as if they are ERC20s. So you approve that for this swap contract. You call Uniswap as you would, and then you withdraw to an external chain. So in a few lines of code, you can actually implement a cross-chain swap, which is quite cool when you consider how much work has been put into building these sort of cross-chain swap applications in the past. And for Curve, it's, again, really similar. Of course, like the DEX contract requires some slightly different logic, but again, it boils down to calling that Curve contract on the bottom and then withdrawing to an external chain. And that's really it. And then for messaging-based solutions, just to compare it, for Omnichain NFTs, messaging often makes sense. So for this, you would issue an NFT contract on Polygon or Ethereum and Polygon and implement those three functions, send, receive, and revert. So when you want to send something from Ethereum to Polygon, you would burn it, send this message with this metadata that's picked up by ZetaChain, and it's issued same NFT, same metadata, same collection, really, but on a different chain. And the cool thing about this is on ZetaChain, it boils down to just being a blockchain that is explorable. So now instead of having kind of like a black box middle ground that is, or middleman that is burning and minting, and you don't have transparency into it, you actually have a full ledger of everything that exists in your collection right now. So that's pretty cool, and kind of an evolution from the earlier approaches to Omnichain NFTs. And yeah, so if you check out our docs, zetachain.com/docs, you can see some of these examples, and we're working on adding more kind of as we speak. And yeah, you can pick up things like Uniswap and Curve or some of the other examples we have there and try deploying. All you really have to do is like switch the RPC and deploy and start interacting with the testnet we call Athens 2. And then on our GitHub, we also have some more examples and interfaces that might be helpful for you guys if you guys are actually diving in. And yeah, just to take a step back, how ZetaChain compares to broader ecosystem. I mentioned Cosmos and Polkadot before. Of course, like the programming paradigm is slightly different for each of them, but at a high level, Cosmos and Polkadot are bound to specific subset of chains. So Cosmos requires a chain to implement IBC on the external network layer, and then Polkadot requires only parachains to be integrated into their ecosystem. So you can imagine ZetaChain as kind of a chain agnostic version of this. So you can integrate Bitcoin. You have this programmability layer on top of all connected chains and assets, and immediate native settlement. So whether you're using messaging or contracts, you can just sign transactions directly on those external chains without wrapping to get users whatever they need. And then you can also imagine ZetaChain, if you guys have seen ThorChain, kind of as a general version of ThorChain. So ThorChain, for context, is similar in the sense that it is a DEX application or chain that can support things like Bitcoin. It's able to sign transactions on external chains in a similar way, but it isn't generalized, and you don't have that smart contract and messaging capability to build other applications other than things that are directly tied to DEX. And then for bridges and messaging, again, a lot of bridging messaging architecture just entails that wrapped pattern. So one, they're like application specific, asset specific, wrapped assets, and don't support that programmable layer. So it's that asynchronous way of messaging or programming that makes some sense for a lot of applications, but I guess like a year or two in from when those have kind of been introduced to the ecosystem, when you talk to developers trying to build with them, oftentimes it gets to very complex architectures, like I was mentioning before, with broadcasting those messages to every chain, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't make sense when you want to build something like Curve or a lending protocol or something like that. And yeah, so we launched a testnet V2 in November. You can play with it at Zeta Labs or labs.zetachain.com. And you can earn points to sort of track your progress on how you're contributing transactions to the network, inviting people to also test with you, and then you can also get involved in our Discord contests and all that stuff. But when you look at this swap contract or swap interface, it is really what I showed before. So you can input Bitcoin and swap for any other asset, and also vice versa. You can swap, Ethereum for BNB, And we have a few assets on there, but it is really just generalized. Basically, the first dApp on ZetaChain. And from November, so from our testnet V1 and V2, we have gotten about 700,000 users testing through Zeta Labs and also just on-chain transactions, doing over 3 million cross-chain transactions and even more internal Cosmos transactions, and over 100 dApps deployed so far. It's still super early, but we're really excited about this traction. Always looking for more developers and partners to work with if they're interested in taking their existing applications and bringing them cross-chain, or just creating something completely new, deploying on ZEVM. And yeah, so where we're at, we just launched that V2 of our testnet called Athens 2, and that was with the Omnichain Smart Contract bit, as well as Bitcoin support and security audits, both on the contract side and the protocol side. Next year, Q1, Q2, we're looking to launch our mainnet and launching with application partners. So one exciting one is DEX, that centralized exchange we're working with is building to sort of bring their wallet and existing users to more of a seamless DeFi experience. And then as well, launching with a number of other pretty exciting partners, ranging from NFT to social to identity-focused applications. And then beyond that, we'll be focusing on expanding the network both on the application side and also on scalability and decentralization improvements. And yeah, I went over a few of these earlier, but just some opportunities we're looking at right now with some of our partners and interested developers. So again, you can deploy existing DeFi primitives on ZetaChain and bring them to Omnichain cross-chain. There's a lot of opportunity in NFTs and DAOs. So you can imagine a DAO that can actually custody and do governance regardless of what chain your members are on, which is pretty cool. And then identity, you can imagine having a smart contract wallet of sorts that can act, say, I have a username at Brandon that can act to write transactions to other chains, manage my portfolio. People can just send to at Brandon, and that'll route to whatever actual underlying external chain I want. That could be very cool and early, but I think that would be a huge improvement to a lot of the UX issues right now in crypto and multi-chain. And yeah, so if you guys are interested in building, again, I'm Brandon. We have a few launch partners lined up that we've announced, and some to be announced when we get closer to launch. But yeah, if you want to build something, there's a lot of opportunity. And yeah, get in touch. I'll be around after, and maybe I can take a few questions if we have time. But otherwise, you can email me. I'm also on Telegram, and this is just a link to our Link3, where you can go to our white paper, all of our social, anything.
We have a little extra time here for Q&A, so please don't be shy.
Hey, does ZetaChain have any grant programs that you guys are funding projects for?
Yeah, so I guess nothing is public, formalized, but with the partners we're working with, we're happy to provide resources that help you guys get started and get building.
Are you guys looking at any particular streams for future grants? Any specific things that you'd like to see?
What do you mean by streams?
Like focusing on certain projects or types of applications.
Yeah.
Problems.
So I guess it's those verticals in that opportunity slide I said before. So these are kind of the 4 core ones we're looking at. And it does kind of blanket over a lot of crypto. A lot of it that we're trying to solve is there are UX issues in each vertical right now that could be a lot better with Omnichain. So people who are interested in building those evolutions is what we're looking at primarily.
Cool, thanks.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for the talk, Brandon. Could you kind of paint the scene for me for what the future might look like once ZetaChain's more matured? Kind of like if a project's going to be choosing to build on Ethereum or ZetaChain, or if there's any like choices that they're going to be making, like, or if there's going to be like a coexistence of ZetaChain and like existing systems today.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way we think about it is, like, we believe in the multi-chain ecosystem. So, like, different blockchains have their own specializations, and will have applications that are more suited to them, like very high compute, low cost, but potentially like slightly less secure as a settlement layer sort of chains versus something like Ethereum mainnet, where it's like everyone's kind of using that as like the end state settlement, and then like privacy, whatever. So for ZetaChain, we're imagining it more like, yeah, if you need to build something that's taking advantage of that, you can build on that chain, but you can connect it to liquidity, users, et cetera, on other chains. So that's kind of the way we imagine it, where it's not we're trying to pull from other chains, users, and liquidity. It's more like if you're specialized in a certain way, that makes sense to build there. And then the Omnichain Smart Contracts situation is more just to layer across that. So if you want to orchestrate things and provide like a better top-level UX for users, people might just interface with the Omnichain Smart Contract, but underlying, you could have a lot of the like core logic living somewhere else. And then the end state from a user standpoint is, yeah, again, being able to just onboard into crypto with whatever wallet and be able to interact with your application or anyone else's, regardless of where it is. So those like underlying, like understanding what network something is operating on, or like where I need to bridge this asset to do X and Y, I don't think that will exist or need to exist for like user education in a lot of ways. It'll be more just on the like dev and like underlying infrastructure side.
Thank you.